Fortunately, through the Fridays for Future movement and other environmental movements that have developed recently, more and more young people are very acquainted to what zero waste or sustainability means. But talking about zero waste, I think that is something very specific. I think that you need to meet the zero waste thing at a certain point in your life. So for young people, schools are really a central place to learn more about zero waste.
In my country, the UK at least, has almost become a sort of class divide, because the idea of a sustainable lifestyle has unfortunately been co-opted or viewed by some as sort of a middle class choice, something that only people with money and spare time on their hands are able to do. And there are some reasons why that is the case.
For example, around 5 years ago, a youth barometer in Finland discovered that around 40% of Finnish young people stated that they had reduced consumption because of worries about climate and environment. So when it comes to consumer practices or ecologically minded consumer practices of young people, it's always important to remember that there's a huge variety among youth. There are young people who are highly interested in these things, and then there are people who are not at all interested in these things. But at least in Finland recently, both quantitative questionnaires and then qualitative researches have frequently showed us that young people are interested in both in general in environmental issues, in climate issues, and they see consumer practices as one key way to make an impact on these things.
The first thing is that there is quite often a financial barrier, because quite often things that are more environmentally friendly, sustainable, such as groceries that don't come wrapped in plastic, clothes that are long-lasting and easily repairable, so on and so forth. A lot of them cost several times more than their cheaper, less renewable counterparts, which is obviously obviously a problem for some people. If they're struggling to get by, then they can't. And thinking about what would be more sustainable isn't really their priority. Activities such as preparing fresh meals to last longer periods of time, and repairing your own clothes, or anything like that. Some things take up a lot of time, and they're only really available to people that have lots of spare time on their hands, as opposed to people who might be working long hours to try and stay afloat.
Often the, let's say, organic products are more expensive than non-organic, or there might not be equal opportunities for recycling stuff in every municipality or so on.
The countryside and the city offer different possibilities, okay? So in the cities, for example, you may have more shops, and then you can maybe have, more possibility of buying sustainable items. And at the same time, in the countryside, you may be more close to nature. You may have some space to grow yourself something. The zero waste movement in general is rooted into anti-capitalism and anti-consumerism.
Is a direct affront to the kind of society we're living in at the moment, which has become a hyper-capitalist, hyper-consumerist society that's focused on buying and buying and spending and spending and spending, and not really caring how much we use or how much we throw away.
We can run into the risk of going towards a green consumerism. Either it is about energy or it is about products, okay, disposable products. We have to have in our mind that, of course, we can choose things that have let's say a lighter impact on the environment, for example, but we need to be aware that the market in the future will push a lot towards consuming those green products.
For many, it's just kind of they just think that this is the environmentally wise choice to make, and they go for it for that reason or some other reason. But sure, there can be this this further element of protest, I guess.
People that are engaging with zero waste and environmental movements in general are very critical of the way that we're living at the moment, because it's very plain to see it's not sustainable, and that profit margins are not really going to be that important once natural disasters continue to get worse and worse and worse every year. You should be able to repair things. You should be able to keep using technology and devices rather than them being made intentionally obsolete so you have to buy the next model. It's a very worrying system, which I think is why so many people are starting to question it.
If we only concentrate on consumerist choices, then we kind of still stay inside the capitalist logic, I guess, or the market economy logic. Whereas climate activists often argue that we need to talk about political decisions. We need to talk about structural changes. We need to talk about the ways that the economy, the businesses, whatever, that they become sustainable.
For young people, schools are really a central place to learn more about zero waste, to this, circular economy, and to start producing in a different way and consuming in a different way, refusing, recycling. And so I think that schools are really one of the places where the zero waste young community can grow a lot. Starting from who you are and where you are, okay, so exactly with what you have in this moment, it's about refusing, so to say no to what we don't need, whether we are in a supermarket, whether we are in a shop, to refuse, and that's the way we start reducing the amount of garbage of waste that we have in our life. Second point, which is very important, is about reducing. So to letting go of things that we don't use anymore, donate, sell, and focusing on what we really need. The third point, which I think is very creative, especially for young people, it's about reusing. Reusing means to give new life to things, to switch disposable items for reusable ones, to upcycling and upcycle things. And I think that upcycling is very interesting for young people because it really needs a fresh approach and creative ideas. One of the last points is about recycling. So recycling already means to have an impact, and it's not really the zero waste, let's say, golden point. It's more important to refuse, reduce, and reuse. And then at the end of the zero waste, let's say, golden list, we have to rot, to compost.
Peer learning is really important among young people. So we might know that this or that thing is important, or we should act this or that way, but we still may lack the spark, the inspiration to engage in these things. And often the inspiration may come from peers, from friends, or social circles that are close to oneself.
You can also try and avoid retailers that have unsustainable business practices. I think this brings, if I can mention, sort of the issue of greenwashing, because lots of companies are trying to portray themselves as becoming more sustainable and wanting to care more about the planet, but it's very insincere and they're still continuing destructive hyper-capitalist business practices. There are some things that we can do to try and make better choices and try and use second-hand items and try not to keep buying things we don't need. But I think the main change is it will enable us to reduce the amount of waste we produce and to reduce the amount of unnecessary things we buy. It really needs to be made at a much higher level, because we can try and change the society, but it is the job of those who are allegedly in charge of it to make those decisions. This needs a major shift in society away from the way we think. The root of them is the same thing, that they're all driven by a continual desire for progress, essentially. But I think we need to recognise that progress doesn't just mean having more or having the latest technology, the most fashionable clothes, and so on and so forth. True progress would be learning how to live in sync with our natural environment and not to take more than we need.
It could be important that these things, the zero waste practices or ecologically minded consumer practices, are not just individual efforts, but there would also be this that the zero waste lifestyle would be easier to practice. Like, let's say somebody wants to start to recycle everything, but if the recycling facilities are not there, then it's worth to pursue people who could have an impact on it, who could kind of help, who could make the structural changes. And I think one of the important things of the recent climate movement of the youth has been that they have been challenging the adult society, and I see no reason that the zero waste practitioners or movements couldn't do the very same thing.
We need to make conscious decisions. It may cost us a lot at the beginning, like to go against this system. It may be hard, but then once creativity steps in, once you have surrounded also yourselves by people who believe in the same values, then it's gonna be really, really easier. Put creativity at the center of the process. Make it your own. And it's not about fitting all your waste into a jar. It's about slowing the pace and taking more time to dedicate to this kind of approach. Because once you have started, then you cannot stop.